Today I'm talking to Hypatia Rhodes. She originally reached out and emailed me, and when she was talking about themes of just the kind of dark feminine, inner rage, all those things, I was like, hell yeah. So we're here to talk about House of Darkness, which as of talking about this today, it's not out yet, but by the time this is post, it'll be out. We follow a human female acolyte who gets sold to a vampire, but he doesn't want acolytes, and they fall in love, and it's beautiful. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to Busy Reading Romantasy, a video podcast that discusses books that merge elements of romance and fantasy while occasionally exploring other genres. We get to escape our world and dive deep into themes of good versus evil, power dynamics, and all of the delicious taboo topics. Curiosity and open-mindedness are a must. That being said, this is a podcast for mature audiences only and will contain spoilers. Your mental health matters, so be sure to check the trigger warnings of each book to decide if this is the right episode for you to listen to. Now, let's get into today's episode. Yeah, sometimes I get authors who are like, I'm sorry if I talk too much, and I'm like, that's the point of this. Please talk. I don't want to hear my voice. I'm here to like let you guys talk.
Well, then I'm in the right place because I never shut up.
Perfect. Yeah. So what have you been up to? Because I forget that the rest of the world has seasons, as we've discussed, being in like Florida. I'm excited because we're getting into like upper 60s in the morning next week, and I'm like, ooh. Yeah, what's fall like been like for you?
Fall is my favorite season. So it's been amazing because we have where I live in Southern Washington, we have all four seasons, like very, very much so. And so right now it's like all the oranges and yellows and the fall leaves. And I am here for all of that. Not here for the rain, which is starting this week. But you know, that's just kind of part of living in Washington.
Yeah.
I haven't been hanging out outside much because I've been getting ready for the release of House of Darkness, and also I just sent off the next book to my editor, so I've been very busy.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's exciting. What are your like fall staples? Like, I need to do these things.
I love to go to the pumpkin patch. We have like the OG hayride pumpkin patches where you go through the field, tromp through the mud, and find your pumpkin. So I'm very excited for that. My best friend and I are going weekend after the next, because next weekend I have a book signing. So weekend after the next, we're gonna go pick pumpkins, and we bedazzle pumpkins. So
yes.
my friend, I can't trust her with knives, so we bedazzle our pumpkins instead. And that, and then I am such a basic white girl. I love my pumpkin spice chai lattes, and so that's been a staple.
Amazing. Yeah, I feel that way. I feel like it's been like 2 or 3 years since, no, it's been about 4 years since I've carved a pumpkin because I wasn't even living here at the time. And I just remember like you get so excited and you get the stencil and you start carving it out, and then halfway through I'm like, well, this was fun. I think I'm over this now. Like I was like, oh. Yeah, it doesn't feel like fall here, but you can bring the vibe. So like I decorated my whole house with, different fall and pumpkin stuff, and I don't have any plans for like haunted houses and stuff like that, but I definitely need to like make some. My friend's working at a haunted house.
I'm a total wuss. I can't go through haunted houses. I would cry.
Oh, that's fair.
I'm a wuss. Yeah, I can't do that. And scary movies. My boyfriend hates that I can't watch scary movies, but I will have nightmares forever.
I feel like I'm really weird where like I can do haunted houses, I can't do scary movies.
That makes
so
sense.
like, yeah.
I feel like the haunted house is like, it's fake versus movies can kind of pull you in a little bit. I get that, actually.
Absolutely. But anyways, getting on to what we're talking about today.
Okay.
Before we get into House of Darkness, I'd love to just know a little bit about you. Were you like an avid reader growing up, and when did you decide to get into writing?
Yeah, so I've always been an avid reader. I've always been a fantasy reader. So Aragon was one of my
Yes.
favorites. And then, yeah, and then Clockwork Angel was kind of what introduced me to Romantasy, even though it's YA. It's still like my
Mhm.
favorite book of all time. And so I've always been an avid reader. I've also always liked writing. I've tried multiple times throughout my life to write a book. Um, but I hadn't tried writing a romantasy until House of Darkness. I'd only tried writing fantasy, and I think the romantasy aspect is what made me interested enough to actually finish a book. I like
Mhm.
the um, interconnections between the characters and like developing characters together, and then also I like writing smut. So that was kind of the element that I needed, I think, to finish a book. So House of Darkness was the first book I finished, even though I've tried multiple times in my life to write a full length novel. Um, yeah. And I kind of, I came up with the idea while driving the car, listening to Death of a Bachelor by Panic at the Disco, and kind of brought in a lot of my personal experience with, being sexually assaulted, being in a situation with DV. And also, I think just I'm a woman in STEM. I have a degree in engineering, and
Mhm.
kind of dealing with daily misogyny a little bit in my career. And that kind of stuff made me want to write the feminine rage aspect and kind of the woman experience kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. When I was looking at your website, I saw that you also partnered with the RAIN program. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and just kind of your overall goals as an author?
Yes. So we actually recently shifted. So
Mhm.
originally I was going to be working with Rain and donating 10% of profits to Rain. I actually decided to go a little bit more local, and I'm working with the YWCA, which is a local women's shelter in my area that
Mhm.
they take in survivors of SA and DV, especially
Mhm.
like families that are escaping DV situations.
Mhm.
So, what I am doing with them, and this is actually kind of the first time I'm talking about it because it's finally set up, but we are partnering with them for this winter to do 10%. And I'm also going to be doing a donation drive to
Mhm.
create winter baskets with like Christmas presents, but also like essentials, that kind of
Mhm.
thing. I'm going to be partnering with authors to kind of donate books to help fundraise, and put together, I'm hoping 10 full baskets to help 10 families
Yeah.
for WICWA and help them. They send out like a list basically of things that they need and we're requesting. And I'm hoping to fulfill those. So I'm very, very
Yeah.
excited about that. I'm kind of working out the fine details, and then I'll be formally announcing that on my channel.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
think I think that is amazing that you're doing that and using this platform for that as well. At the end of the episode, I usually ask, where people can find you, but where can people find you right now, just in case they want to like definitely get more information about that as it comes out.
Yeah, I'll be posting most of it on my Instagram platform. So at
Perfect.
Hypatia Rhodes author, all like one word basically.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I'm hoping to be announcing that soon. I'm kind of working out the details of figuring out which authors are going to be willing to donate books to help
Yeah.
fundraise. We're going to do like some giveaway tiers basically. So
Mhm.
for how much money we fundraise, we'll do a giveaway of a book from an author. Um, yeah, so definitely follow my Instagram. That will be where I kind of start talking about that. It was definitely something I try to remain apolitical, but I still wanted to do good and feel like I am making a difference. And I felt like, kind of putting my money where my mouth is a little bit, and
Mhm.
picking some kind of program and putting energy into that and using my little bit of exposure and reach to make a difference was something that was really important to me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, is there anything that part of me wants to say that you see maybe people get not get wrong, but maybe misunderstand about dealing with DV situations, or because I know a lot of times in romantasy in general, we get stuff like dubcon or kind of different. There's a reason there's triggers at the beginning
Yeah.
of books that we read. I'm just curious in your experience as a reader and a writer, is there anything that you wish more people understood about those kinds of situations?
Yeah, and so all of this is obviously my own personal opinions. I am
Yeah,
not
yeah,
judging anyone else's and
yeah,
I am not hating on any of my fellow authors at all.
yeah.
I wish that things like DebCon and CNC were handled with a little bit more care. I think that a lot of times I feel like it's kind of become a competition, especially in dark romance, to basically like up the ante and keep making things darker and more drastic. And I think
Hmm.
that that's the wrong attitude to approach those kind of topics with. Like, I think you can do DubCon well, and I think you can do CNC well. And those are actually very popular kinks for people who have endured sexual violence.
Hmm.
It's kind of like a cathartic kink in that
Hmm.
aspect, but I think that they could be handled with more care. I think a lot of times I see things that are labeled as DubCon, but they're just basically assault. Like, not to call out anyone, but Haunting Adeline, there's a couple scenes in that book that are definitely not what I would consider dubcon. I would consider them just assault,
Yeah,
and kind of sexualized assault, which is not how that should be handled. I think, like for instance, in House of Darkness, with the sexual assault scene, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out the best way to convey what my goals were with that scene, and I
hmm,
kept going back to like, okay, why am I writing this? Because
hmm,
I didn't want it to just be like for the shock and awe effect. I wanted it to be about her trauma and then her eventual growth from that trauma, which
hmm.
is why I chose to make it a fade to black scene, because I didn't want that to be the highlight of that scene. um so I think we need to shift away from the shock and awe aspect of sexual assault in DV and focus on the like residual impacts to the people that are receiving it, and are surviving those situations, because I think that's typically the goal in showing those kind of scenes, is to give the reader some kind of connection and catharsis through that.
Hmm.
um, at least that's kind of my goal whenever I'm writing and showing those kind of things. The goal is not just make it as gory and horrifying as possible. I want it to be something that you're connecting to.
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's so well said. And it's even interesting when you first started talking, registering from a reader's perspective, that almost kind of, like you said, that a little bit of a competition feel, or maybe a little bit of an ego driven of like, well, I can read this,
Yeah.
and to just kind of, I think, sit with that a little bit and see, like, why are you reading the things that you're reading, and tracking your own responses to them as well. I think that's one thing that, especially in the more romantasy slash fantasy side in general, where there is more magic and make believe, it's not contemporary. It blurs it a little bit more, but also this fundamental understanding that this is a work of fiction, it's not real, and there's an understanding that in the majority of the books, you're going to get some sort of happily ever after, and these things are happening with a character that we are trusting has the main character's best interest in mind. There's kind of there's more to it to a degree. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think it comes down to, I think it's the author's responsibility to handle dark topics with care, as much care as they can.
Yeah.
be intentional about why they're including it. And then I think it's the reader's responsibility to make sure that they're being careful with their mental health and what they're reading. And also, like you said, keep in mind that they're works of fiction, they're works of fantasy. It's not real life, those kind of things in real life, like, yeah, great. Roman is a murderer in the book, and that's hot in the book, but that's not hot in real life.
Yeah.
um, those kind of things, like making sure that we differentiate between those and keeping that kind of mental health conscious focus when you're reading as well, I think is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we've mentioned it a few times, but we are here today to talk about House of Darkness, which will be released soon as we're talking about this, but by the time the episode comes out, it will already be released. Just for anybody who hasn't read it yet, do you mind giving a little kind of synopsis or overview if they're interested in checking it out?
Yeah, absolutely. So the basic plot line is very similar to like The Handmaid's Tale, but with a high society of vampires where women are raised from children to be basically, I hate using this word, but it's the best way to describe it, like breeding slaves for vampires.
Mhm.
Um, and our main female character is one of these, what we call in the series, acolytes. And she is purchased by the Tsar of vampires, who we learn very quickly is like the youngest Tsar in history. He's kind of like turning the tides. He's kind of, shaking things up a little bit. And his position in the throne is kind of unstable. And they're both have like these very traumatic pasts. They're kind of broken people that are coming together and connecting over their history and their shared kind of dark personalities. And they get to a point at the end where they're kind of deciding to change things up and change the world and fix a lot of problems. But yeah, typically how I describe it is Handmaid's Tale, high society of vampires with tropes kind of similar to ACOTAR, where we have like the shadow daddy with wings, the found family, the
Mhm.
sassy FMC kind of vibes.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So if you have watched this podcast before, this is the part where I say if you haven't read it yet and want to, I recommend pausing here, read the book, and then you can come back and enjoy the discussion, because we are not going to be filtering anything. We are going to have an in-depth discussion of the book, including all of the spoilers and specifically the ending and where things end up. So with that said, kind of getting starting by setting the scene. You mentioned how women are sold as acolytes, and we have our main female main character, Estrella, who gets purchased by Roman. Can you just kind of set the scene a little bit more on how everything is starting and where kind of especially Estrella, where she's at in the book so far?
Yeah, so my first kind of tidbit I would give is that the first scene is based, if you've ever watched the 2010 Van Helsing
Mm.
movie, it's based on the ballroom scene from that movie, where she's dancing with Dracula and she's clearly uncomfortable, but she's under kind of his spell and is kind of forced to endure him in that scene. I also just love the like very gothic beauty of that scene. My main goal with the very first chapter, when Estrella goes from dancing with the vampire Edward, who is not a good guy, to dancing with Roman, was the contrast between her internal monologue and what her actual personality was and what she is conditioned to act like. And I thought that that was such a fascinating way to kind of show the dichotomy between her personality and kind of introducing her character, but also introducing the kind of situation that the acolytes are forced to endure by showing how uncomfortable she is with Edward and how she is not expressing her opinions and not comfortable talking or acting like herself in any way in that scene. Um, and I thought that was a very interesting way to show her character, but also the society that she is born in that is conditioning her responses to things. So that was my main goal with that first scene, was kind of setting the societal conditioning and introducing you to Estrella. Although obviously we also introduce Roman, who comes in, swoops her off her feet kind of situation, very dark, charming guy, but that also is his persona, where that's not actually how he is throughout the series, throughout the story,
Mm-hmm.
where he is also kind of putting on a front in that scene as she is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what stood out for me and what I could kind of relate to my um, own personality and experiences. Granted, I was never sold as an acolyte, luckily. But when Roman first, eventually he shows up and he's like, "I'm taking her now," which super hot. Love that
Yeah.
whole situation. But it's recognizing like she has been taught that she needs to. There's a certain level of how she should act and behave, and the things that she should say and do. Like her job is to please him. And so in the beginning, when she's like, in her head, kind of being like, "Oh, I'm supposed to say, whatever, yes, sir," or, whatever the rules are, and he's like, "No, we don't have to do this," which is also confusing and hard when are taught to be one way, which I relate to more of the kind of being taught certain people pleasing aspects of being female, and kind of you're expected to do this and you want to do this and be nice and charming and all those pieces. So I thought what was really cool was getting Roman's backstory and how that eventually leads to kind of recognizing that she would be so weary and hesitant and stressed out by him gifting her anything, that he was like, "All right, let's make a deal. If you
Yeah.
pretend to be my acolyte, I will give you all these supplies to start, and shop." And I thought that was like a beautiful way where she felt like, okay, I can work for this. I have a clear goal. Can you talk a little bit about Roman's backstory and what ended up happening with his parents that inevitably led to him having the views that he has?
Yeah, so I started his character always knowing that his mother was killed by his
Mhm.
father and that he kills his father. That actually kind of, tidbit comes back later in the series in kind of introducing the rest of the world. Um, the patricide comes back to kind of be discussed later. But I didn't know, there was a lot more depth to his character that I wasn't sure if I was going to add. Like, first of all, his backstory with sexual trauma. And I was very nervous about including that in the story because I was worried it would be incorrectly perceived. Um, but I thought it was such an important aspect to his character connecting with Estrella and the sexual trauma that she goes through, and
Mhm.
showing kind of different ways that people can be exposed to sexual trauma. And um, I thought it also added layers to his respect for Estrella and how he treats Estrella, in the fact that he was forced to kind of endure acolytes through his father and be traumatized through that by the fact that those acolytes pretended to like him and pretended to go through those things while he knew that they didn't, because he could read their minds.
Mhm.
Um, and I thought that kind of dynamic very much like brought those two characters together and brought their pasts some depth and made him more like able to relate with Estrella. That comes through a lot in like the first sexual scene,
Mhm.
where how he is behaving is very clearly because of his past and his trauma, with interacting with other acolytes in the past and how he was
Mhm.
forced to interact with them. Same
Mhm.
with his first interactions with Ilva, who he had clearly had sex with in the past but didn't want to. He was coerced into doing that by his father.
Mm-hmm.
And how that kind of is also defining how people interact with him as the new czar.
Mm-hmm.
Same with his alcoholism, and I knew that someone would eventually not like that about his character. Uh, I did get a couple negative reviews about that, which I totally was expecting, but I thought, again, when I kind of developed the backstory of a character and their trauma, I try to kind of go step by step through how that would actually look in a real person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Instead of just kind of, oh, he has a bad backstory, so now he's dark and broody and sits out in the rain and looks off into the sunset.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to look at, okay, if you were very seriously abused your entire life and watch your mother die in front of your eyes, how would that impact you as a person, both in redeemable ways and not 100% redeemable ways. So, leaning into substance abuse and that kind of thing is a pretty common response to that kind of trauma. So I wanted to include that, and I wanted to include something that is very much not an attractive trait in him, but
Mm-hmm.
makes him more human and more relatable and real on the page. Yeah. Did that
Yeah.
answer the question?
Those, yeah. No, and that was exactly my thought. Was like that was my first thought, was it makes him more human. It's I think to have a character that would face all that and kind of is like, but I'm all better from it. Like,
Yeah.
there's a degree where you're like, okay, interesting. And that like soul crushing moment, that was the thing, he was out drinking when she gets taken later on, that, that was like the big eyes open moment where you're like, oh my gosh. And I felt so bad for him, and probably the guilt that he was going through when that happens.
Yeah, and I think it would have been so much easier to just make it like, oh, he was saving a burning building and all the children inside of it, and that's why he wasn't there. But
Yeah.
instead, making it genuinely that he was, running off, kind of being a little bit selfish in that
Mm-hmm.
aspect, and you know, that genuine, honest to God guilt when he gets back and realizes that his mistake,
Mm-hmm.
genuine mistake, caused her harm, and how that kind of builds up into his growth as a character, but also, there's more of a series here. So
Yeah.
his uh, flaws that are
Mm-hmm.
developed because of his guilt and trauma and fears from having that happen kind of come
Yeah.
into play through his whole character arc.
And I think that makes for such a much more beautiful love story, in my opinion, is being able to see those flaws and those not so attractive characteristics, and to still be like, I'm here for you, and I forgive you, and we can move on from this, and continue to love each other despite, what someone might be going through, because everyone's gonna have something, you know.
Yeah. And
So
that, I think, is so true. Like when you get with someone in real life and you develop a long-term relationship with somebody and love somebody, that is with all of their ugliness. And I think people in the real world, none of us are perfect. All of us have our baggage. All of us have genuine, not great qualities about
yeah.
ourselves. And I think that
Mhm.
that's kind of, I wanted to make sure both characters had that, because I think that's what makes characters human and makes them relatable. Because if you have the perfect MMC, that's hot, but it's not
Mhm.
exactly real, and you don't really connect with them as a
Yeah.
person.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Before we get into some of the more spicy aspects, I'd love to get your thoughts on what it was like creating kind of his inner circle, all of those characters. And I think it was really fun as a reader getting Estrella. She starts meeting and has little moments with each of them. Yeah.
Yeah, so Isabella was the first character that I developed in the Found Family. I kind of started by just kind of how I start most side characters is I'll go on and look up character art or character references and kind of go until I see an artwork that kind of speaks to me. And then once I kind of see an art piece that I'm like, oh, this, like, I'm getting some kind of creative juices flowing, I guess, from looking at this art. And I kind of try to create that backstory and like, if this character was in my world, what would they act like? What would they look like? How would they interact with the other characters in the plot? Um, and kind of all of that. Isabella came for me from the fact that I wanted each of the female side characters to kind of embody a female caricature that is either kind of shown as weak or kind of brushed off in a way. And I think that, you know, the mom character in a lot of books is kind of just shown as the mom character, even though I think we all know that moms are like the most kick-ass people on the planet. They're the ones who keep the world running. And I wanted to show that strength in a mom character through Isabella and show her outside of that being strong too. Like she kicks ass fighting, she kicks ass at everything she does, kind of thing, because that's her personality. Same with Solaris. I wanted kind of that girly pop daydreamer kind of what's manic pixie dream girl kind of vibe with Solaris. But I wanted to show that as a strength where even though we don't get a ton of Solaris, you can kind of tell that she is a girl who knows what she wants and gets what she wants. And how that can kind of come from that like typically brushed off manic pixie dream girl vibe kind of caricature. Soren is actually the only character in the book that is kind of based on a real character. I know somebody personally who has this tendency to use comedy and offensiveness and kind of that dramatic kind of persona to hide their own trauma and experiences and kind of hide themselves from the people that they care about. And I thought it was just such a fascinating like kind of personality trait to dive into that I kind of embodied in Soren a little bit. And I'm very excited to kind of continue developing him and Enzo. Obviously, we don't reveal their backstories in House of Darkness. That their backstories will be revealed though, and I'm very excited to kind of continue growing those two characters because they have such depth in their backstories, and a lot of their personalities will make sense after the next book. But I also loved the idea of having kind of these two broken brothers vibe between Soren and Roman, especially in the scene where Soren pulls Roman out of the bar and Roman is just not having a good moment. Like he's just, you know, having a tough time. And Soren kind of pulls him off the floor and drags him out kind of thing. And even though he's being kind of hard on him and kind of a jerk about it, you can tell that he very clearly loves him and wants him to get out of that trench in his life. And again, I think that kind of develops some of the depth in Soren's backstory while still not revealing Soren's backstory yet. Then Razvan is probably one of my personal, like, I connect with him pretty significantly. He kind of came out of a place of, I have chronic lung illness, chronic conditions, and almost died in 2021. And that was very, very traumatic for me, where I was kind of bedridden for about 6 to 8 months and almost died and had to endure feeling that inadequacy and like being very ill and being bedridden and trapped and all of that. And Resvan came out of that kind of trauma and experience for me, where I wanted to kind of dive into the chronic illness and the feeling of being trapped and powerless and insignificant, which is embodied in Resven, and obviously his story is developed more pretty soon. And yeah, so those I think are kind of the reasoning behind a lot of those characters, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I love getting to talk to authors and like
Yeah.
just getting all of the kind of inspiration and backstory and just the extra tidbits that you wouldn't necessarily know simply just from reading the book. So all of that being said, I'm glad you're here today and you get to share your work with the world. But yeah, I'd love to kind of get into more of the spiciness between Roman and Estrella as things heat up. One scene that definitely stood out for me is when she is actually doing the work of pretending to be his acolyte, and they're staying in the same room, and kind of the whole concept of her being collared, and she's wearing this whole dress and everything. There is just something about devouring when they're like, I just want to devour you. And I'm like, yes, that's it. I could die happy at that moment. Can you tell me a little bit just around kind of writing spice and writing tension and especially choosing to add kind of those elements?
Yeah, spice has always come kind of easy to me, which is not the case for a lot of authors. I have a harder time with like fighting scenes than I do with my spicy scenes.
Fair.
Most of the spice scenes went through very minimal editing. Like those are pretty much first draft spice scenes.
You were like, got it.
Kind of. I mean, yeah. So I enjoy writing those scenes. I think they're a lot of fun. When I developed Roman and Estrella, I knew that I wanted to get into some of like dip the toes into the dark romance side of things, and show very explicit sexual content, kind of the dark, dominating shadow daddy vampire vibes that Roman embodies, while still kind of I wanted to show that you could have that while still having explicit consent in every scene, and having like that kind of dynamic. I wanted to show that you can still be kinky and have consent. And yeah, I mean, I think that in that first scene, I wanted to kind of build that tension because you don't get the relief of that until they have sex at the midpoint in the book.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of helped to confuse Estrella more, where she is very much battling her desires toward Roman and how she knows that she wants him and like all of that, but still is battling with this concept of like, I can't be with him and still have my freedom, which kind of comes into play later in the story where she's like, no, I can have freedom and still have my like found family and be in love with this person. That's kind of part of her character arc where she kind of gives into that, but then immediately kind of is like, wait, I shouldn't be doing this. Like, I should not have this guy's head between my legs. Like,
Yeah.
this should not be happening right now. But I think it also went into building that like obsession with Roman, where he is very clearly invested and wants to be involved in that. And that scene actually has a little bit of an Easter egg in it. I don't know if so. There's a prequel, a little short prequel that runs with Soren, where Roman interrupts Soren in the middle of having sex in that in that book, and so Soren's attempts at interrupting their sexy time throughout this book is kind of a nod to that. So him interrupting them when he knows very clearly that his bro is getting it is a kind of a nod to that. But yeah, that honestly, I think that scene was just me having fun because I knew I wanted the eating out scene. I wanted it with the collar on and the red dress, and like he's dressed in finery. They're ready to go to a party. And it kind of developed that next scene where she's going in, she's kind of being revealed as his acolyte for the very first time. We meet Cadran in that scene, which develops the rest of the story, but where she's going in and she's like, I can still feel his saliva between my legs.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be like professional and behave like an acolyte, and he's just like totally here for it the whole time, and they're kind of banter in their heads while he's walking her in. And all of those emotions kind of coming to a head with that scene.
Yeah. I think it just screams like kind of peak femininity, the idea of like she's taught that she is serving a purpose, she has a job to do, she has to put out, and to have a scene where he's like, nope, I'm here for you. You're like, oh yeah. Where she can just enjoy it. She probably is freaking out a little bit because she's like, wait, hang on, I don't, when you're not expecting that, right, you're like, oh wait, this can be a thing. Yeah.
And I think it kind of goes well with the kind of previous bedroom scene where they walk in and there's the one bed, and it's clearly Alexander's bed, who is clearly very promiscuous and gets it on with a lot of his acolytes and all that. And she's like, this gross, disgusting sex room, and she's having like this whole panic attack over the fact that she's like in this skimpy gown and in this room that, is clearly like the lovemaking den, and with this guy that she's very attracted to, but also trying to do a job, trying to maintain that acolyte front while also trying to like still gain her freedom, which she's very focused on in that point. And then having that tension kind of build in that scene where he comes out shirtless in the sweatpants, and then she, they go to bed and don't do anything, but then it kind of comes to a head in that scene.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to, I know we could sit here, we've established we could sit here and talk all day. I'd love to skip ahead. No, you're all good. I'd love to skip ahead towards kind of a little further in the book. So as we mentioned earlier, she does get kidnapped, and that's a whole thing in and of itself. But I'd love to go to when he is able to get her back, and kind of how he supported her in healing from such a journey. Because even what stood out to me was him being like, you don't have to go see them right away, the rest of the girls that they saved, and just kind of being there for her and realizing this is something that takes time.
So when I was sexually assaulted, I didn't really tell anyone for a long time. I was threatened at that time, so I didn't tell anyone for a really long time, probably at least like 2.5 years, that I kind of sat on that by myself and didn't confide in anyone. And so when I started writing, especially the bathtub scene and that first scene after she wakes up, which is the only scene that made me cry while I was writing it, I really just thought about like what I would have wanted in that time. Like, what if I had somebody that knew and was there for me, what would I have wanted them to do? And I think when it comes to sexual assault, I think the biggest thing that all survivors would agree on is that kind of everyone has their own method of healing, and no healing method is the right method. Like, there's not a right way to experience that kind of trauma. And I wanted to highlight that, where he is just kind of there and he's like, whatever you need to do right now to feel like this is, process this information and process this experience. I'm just here for what you need. And I think that's the best, at least in my opinion, and what I would have wanted. That was probably the best that you could give somebody in that situation, where you're just I'm here, like, for anything you need. Whatever you need to do to process this is okay, you know? And, like, there is no cowardly way to process that kind of information where she's, like, feeling that kind of guilt over not going and seeing her sister, who has experienced far worse trauma at this point. I mean, for almost like several months at that point that she had been down there, and she feels guilty about that, but him explaining, like, there is no guilt over that. You're processing something, you're needing time to digest this. And for me, a big thing I wanted to show throughout Estrella's entire character, and this comes kind of from my autism, where my love language is physical touch and physical affection. You know, I've been with my man 11 years and we still hold hands everywhere we go. That kind of thing. And touch is very important to me. But when I first started becoming intimate after my sexual assault, like, that was such a conflicting feeling because I wanted the comfort of touch. But touch was scary because the last touch I had received was not positive. So that conflicting experience, and that's something I tie into her entire character from the very beginning chapter of, like, the comfort of his touch versus, like, fearing it because of the experiences that she's had, but still kind of wanting it and wanting the comfort that's there, kind of comes to a head in that scene where he explains, like, you, whatever you need. And she realizes, like, she wants the physical affection, not necessarily in a sexual way, even though, like, they're nude in the bathtub together. I tried to be very intentional about making that not sexual in any way, like, just making it physical comfort in that moment. And yeah, that was something I had wished for. So that scene kind of came from just almost a moment of healing and catharsis for me, where I basically wrote the scene I wanted to have but didn't get to have. And I wanted Estrella to have that.
Yeah, well said, and thank you for sharing that. And I think that's one of the things that I enjoy talking about when it comes to books, that what writing and reading gives us is an opportunity to kind of play out these scenes in a way, whether from the writer perspective, and even the reader perspective, just experiencing and seeing different things, and again, going after that kind of happily ever after where you do get, you know, the positive support. And then we get to see this shift in Estrella, and she definitely starts to grow from that, and I want to say, like, take her power back. And I want to talk especially about the final battle, how that goes down, and especially what ends up happening when she catches Ilya and all of that. All that goodness.
So kind of from that bathtub scene to the ending, I wanted to have her simultaneously taking her power back, which kind of comes in the mirror scene, where she kind of finally fully snaps, and Roman's there to support her in kind of acknowledging that she can take her power back and take her strength back. But also I wanted to tie that in to her kind of inherent darkness and the morally gray aspect of her character, where she kind of gets fed up and becomes a little bit more violent and a little bit more, like, I don't know, I just love that about both of their characters, the little bit of morally gray and kind of a little bit of crazy on both of them. And so that kind of forms in the mirror scene where she punches the mirror and, you know, the blood and all of that. And then, you know, I knew from kind of reading other romantasies where the girl always starts with some kind of abilities and strengths. And, you know, like, for instance, Poppy in From Blood and Ash, how she starts, like, with the ability to wield a blade and can fight and all of those things. I intentionally didn't want Estrella to have that. I wanted her to start out with basically no real, like, skill set or talents that would allow her to thrive in this kind of environment.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's commentary on the fact that like treating women as objects takes away a lot of our survival skills and our ability to fight back against that perception of being treated as an object. And I also wanted people to be able to connect with her character where she starts. I mean, I don't think any of us could go into a battle with twin daggers and go kill a vampire, right now, but
Yeah.
showing her growth in learning that kind of gives the reader a connection point where like she starts out as a regular girl and then has to work for everything she gets.
Yeah.
And so, she is starting to take her power back by learning to fight with Enzo. And I wanted that to always kind of be realistic, where it's still a human girl with a couple months of fighting experience, fighting well-trained vampires. And that's still kind of an unrealistic aspect, although she gets more training as the series goes on. But when I just was trying to decide between having Estrella fight and kill Cadran versus fighting and killing Ilya, I think that it came down to me that I wanted Roman to take the part of killing her monster, and being kind of like the knight in shining armor in that aspect a little bit, but also just the realistic aspect of Cadran is a several hundred-year-old vampire with several hundred years of battle experience, and seeing Estrella kill him or like fight him in a battle scene would have been kind of unrealistic. But Ilya is the girl who came in and betrayed her. Ilya came in and acted as her first, not her first, but acted as her friend in a point where she was very insecure. She was, figuring out that she loved Roman, and Ilya came in, became her first customer, was like fronting as the girl's girl. And that connection between Ilya and Solaris, where Estrella kind of saw her sister in Ilya, which is intentional. Ilya is supposed to be basically the corrupted version of Solaris, where Ilya is the dreamer, girly pop vibe, but corrupted by Cadran. And I thought it would be more impactful to show Estrella going after Ilya, because Ilya is the one who stabbed her in the back. Ilya is the one who decided to like kind of violate the girl code a little bit by betraying all of these women to a man that she was obsessed with. So the scene where Estrella is like chasing after Ilya to go kill her is kind of like that build up to her angers and frustrations and wanting to just like stab a bitch kind of vibes.
Yeah.
And chasing off after her through the like wreckage and all of that. And also the acknowledgement in Ilya that she realizes that Estrella has grown and turned into a threat, like a force to be reckoned with. Ilya is still a vampire. She could, logistically kill a human being, but she acknowledges in that moment that she is evenly matched with Estrella. And then that final scene where she fights Ilya, I wanted that scene where Roman kills Cadran and Estrella kills Ilya. I didn't want to glorify it necessarily, but I did want it to be a little bit of a shock factor in the fact that like they just murdered these people in cold blood kind of energy. And I did my best not to glorify that. Like the scene where she's fighting her on the ground, they're pulling each other's hair, she's like crawling after her to fight her and stuff, and finally kills her. It's more about like the change in her character to the point where, okay, she took her power back. She now is this brutal vampire queen of, the forces, and had to show that she was even capable of taking that position through bloodshed and brutality, which she still at that point is kind of accepting. Like she fully acknowledges it by the end of the story, but she's still accepting the fact that she's not necessarily like a good person. She's
Mhm.
very morally gray and kind of
Mhm.
accepting her darkness, which is furthered and okayed by the fact that Roman is also morally gray and is
Mhm.
totally down with her being a little bit evil and like a little bit brutal, and he's obviously very turned on by the fact that she just like killed somebody.
Yeah.
um, and I think it kind of brought it full circle with seeing them dead, seeing
Mhm.
her monsters vanquished, um, and kind of tying that together with Solaris, because those two people were Solaris's monsters too.
Yeah.
Um, and the sisterly aspect will come into play more in the
Mhm.
rest of the series, but having that, but also acknowledging that it still happened. There's still evil in the world, that
Mhm.
there's still a lot of problems they need to solve, and it's not necessarily a glorious day or a victory, but it's just a reality of what
Mhm.
happened, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And especially as you were talking about the aspect of her just being a human, not having been trained and everything. And I think that's such a good, again, kind of tying it to our real world of if you are going to take action and heal and grow from things like that takes work too. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. Unfortunately, we don't get a training montage and then we skip a chapter to like a year later where we're all trained and everything's good.
Yeah.
And I really liked, as you say, when they're like crawling around and chasing after each other, like just the messiness. And I think, as you said, with your goal of kind of conveying that more like feminine rage and that dark side, I'm like, that's it. It's that messiness.
Yeah.
And it's so great to read it in a book because Lord knows I can't do that in real life. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm happy to read about it at least.
Yeah, I posted recently about like feminine rage and all that, and I was like,
Yeah.
my therapist says it's healthier to write about women burning it all down than kicking a guy in the balls. So, you know, let's just stick to reading about it, I guess.
I guess.
I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so I'd love to just know kind of what where book book end one book one ends, and then getting into what's next. What can we look forward to for book two?
Yeah, so the next book I'm releasing is a prequel. So, and people get kind of, don't pull the pitchforks out yet. But the next book is prequel following one of the found family characters. I
Mhm.
haven't necessarily revealed which one yet, but I'm not very sneaky. You can figure it out if you go to my page. I have definitely left hints.
Fair.
But one of the found family characters, and I wanted to introduce a bit more of like the world building, the politics, the economy, and introduce some of the other houses
Mhm.
that don't get introduced in book one. A lot of the world building that I had initially wanted to include in House of Darkness had to get cut for brevity.
Mm. Mhm.
House of Darkness was like 200,000 words when I first wrote it, so I had to cut it in half.
I see.
So I wanted to build in some more of that like world building, introduce a couple more pretty fundamental characters that are going to be in book two.
Mhm.
Um, the love interest in the prequel of the book I'm working on is pretty important character in book two. So that aspect coming in. But I just sent that off to my editor on Monday.
Mhm.
So
Ooh.
that book is getting pretty close to done.
Yeah.
I am hoping to release it in April.
Okay.
So that's coming pretty soon. And then I am working on actual book two with Roman and
Mhm.
Estrella, where um, as we kind of left it off with the epilogue in House of Darkness,
Mhm.
we're kind of coming into this world where Estrella is now the Tsarina, and also they have just banned the sale of acolytes
Mhm.
entirely, which we know from Roman's experience in banning the abuse of acolytes is not necessarily like 100% a good thing. Like that can have some pretty
Yeah.
dire consequences. But kind of that acknowledgement that they're already going to war. They know that at this point, and they're
Mhm.
like, we might as well fucking shoot for the stars and ban it all
Mhm.
while we do this. So I kind of hint in House of Darkness that Kadran is not obviously the ultimate evil.
Mhm.
He is kind of the side effect of the evil of the society
Yeah.
and all of that.
Yeah.
We get to meet the big bad in book 2,
Mhm.
and get a lot more of that world building. We get to see Enzo and Soren's backstories, get more of their characters,
Mhm.
and get to see kind of the world falling apart a little bit also, while Estrella is turning into more of a badass. You know,
I see.
we're starting book 2 several months after book 1, where she's had all this time to train and become the
Mhm.
Tsarina and all of that. So I'm very excited to dive into that story. I already have about 30,000 words of a first draft done, and I'm hoping to release book 2 in 2026, but we'll see.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, Hypatia, thank you so much for joining me today and chatting.
Yeah.
It was such a great conversation. I would absolutely love to have you back either to discuss future books or just more about writing in general and just like all of the kind of core themes that you seem to be about are things that I all love to support and would love to talk about more and just kind of look at, deeper. So, can you let everyone know again once more where they can find you if they'd love to get in contact or just kind of follow your work more?
Absolutely. So I have a TikTok and Instagram and a Facebook page. TikTok and Instagram are Hypatia Rhodes author. I'm most active on Instagram. And then I also have a Facebook group called The Village of Vice, which is a spoiler-friendly space. So
Okay.
if anyone reads House of Darkness and wants to kind of gossip about certain scenes or talk to other people who've read the book, that Facebook group is a great place to go. I also do a lot of like giveaways and like exclusive stuff on my Facebook group that I don't do on my regular
Yeah.
pages. So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Good to know. Well, thank you again for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so
Okay.
much.
If you've made it to this point in the episode, thank you so much for watching. I'd be incredibly grateful if you showed some support either by following or subscribing, depending on what platform you're watching on, and leaving a comment. You can always follow me on Instagram at Busy Reading Romantasy or on TikTok at busy.reading.romantasy to see what I'm up to. You can also email me at busyreadingromantasy@gmail.com to tell me your thoughts, dreams, secrets, or if you just have any book and author suggestions you'd love me to cover. Grab yourself a good book, get cozy. I'll see you next Wednesday for a new episode.